Three, two, one. What's happening, guys? This is Logan Robinson from Hear the Spear, presented to you by NoleGameDay.com. We are here live on a wonderful Wednesday evening, and we've got some spring camp to talk about. We didn't have an episode last week. Not much to talk about last week. I decided to take a little break, well-needed one, before we go on a roll here heading into camp with Mike Norvell's fourth season as a head coach in Tallahassee. A big, fun camp ahead. With me this evening is Dustin Lewis, our editor-in-chief at NoleGameDay.com, and down below is our lead basketball writer, Austin Veazey. Gentlemen, good to be back with you guys after a little bit of a break, but we're back at it, and it feels good. I missed you guys.
Yeah, it's been a minute. Got a chance to get the batteries recharged a little bit, and like you said, some spring football to talk about tonight ahead of a really highly anticipated season for Florida State. You know, a lot of momentum building in Tallahassee and a lot of expectations as well.
I did not get the batteries recharged. I made the poor decision to go to Clemson to watch Florida State lose by 40.
It just never ends with you, dude.
It's been a rough week.
I just meant batteries recharged from seeing you guys.
Okay, exactly. Well, guess what? You're about to see me in person a lot more. You had your nice little break from me, Dustin, but you're now going to see me quite a bit.
In like a month, so I doubt it.
Yeah, you'll have a little stretch there, and then I'll be out of your hair in a few weeks. But these next two, though, will be right up in you, and we're going to be having a good time. Florida State will have their media luncheon next Friday, and then that Monday we will have a practice. We'll actually have a practice that we'll be able to come on here and talk about and give our instant reaction to. So things starting to feel a little bit like football weather in here, things warmer in Tallahassee. So this episode will be specifically previewing Florida State's offense, which, like you were saying, Dustin, there's a lot of anticipation, a lot of high expectations surrounding this fan base for the season upcoming for Mike Norvell and his staff, and a lot of it is predicated around the offense. So we will jump into that in just a minute. As always, you can listen to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. I know a lot of listeners are listening on the podcast waves. Appreciate you hanging out there with us always. Also, our live stream listeners. So appreciate you guys. But let's jump into things. After we missed a week, we didn't miss much, but of course, the day after that, it was announced Florida State's spring schedule that we do want to bring up to you guys, so then you can be informed on that. Florida State is going to allow the media to come into tour of duty on March 2nd. That'll be a Thursday early morning, D-Lou. I remember that one. You're not a fan of the early mornings, right?
I'll make it for that.
Yeah, you will, at least for that. But overall, not a big fan of getting up too early. So the Coach Storms wouldn't get along.
Yeah, probably not. But the good thing is most of the spring practices are normally in the afternoon or evening. So I've got that advantage.
That is a huge advantage. So, yeah, we'll be out there. We'll have full coverage for you guys on Thursday, getting some early looks at some of the newcomers, including freshmen and then transfers too. I know a lot of chatter about Jaheim Bell, Hakeem Williams, what they look like working out. We'll see what kind of media related things we can give to you guys. Last year it was pretty locked down and we couldn't take videos and pictures and all that kind of stuff, kind of strict on that end, but hopefully we'll be able to give you guys some good intel from what we saw. At least we'll be able to come on to Hear the Spear and give our thoughts. But yeah, wanted to throw that out there to you guys on tour of duty. And then we'll have, like I said earlier, we'll have a pre-spring media luncheon, which also includes Mike Norvell's introductory press conference into the spring camp. So we'll be talking then, and I believe we'll be hearing from all of the assistants too. Yeah. So we'll be able to go one-on-one and interview a few of them, which will be good. That's always good, Dustin, being able to jump around, also eat lunch with some of the coaches. A really cool thing that FSU has done, and Mike Norvell has really pushed for the media to be as close as they can with the team, which allows us to give really solid coverage to you guys listening and watching.
For sure. It's always cool to further relationships. And, you know, a lot of the times throughout the season, you mainly get to hear from Mike Norvell and the coordinators, but now we'll get a chance to hear more from the actual position group coaches and how guys are progressing, how some of the new guys are kind of assimilating and asserting themselves early on. So, yeah, that should be exciting ahead of, you know, the team actually getting on the field that following Monday.
And then the real fun begins. Florida State will kick off its spring camp on March 6th. They'll be their first spring practice. That'll be on Monday. We'll be there in attendance for that to give you guys full coverage, and then it kind of starts rolling after that. It'll go March 8th, March 10th, and then spring break will happen, and then everything gets back in action on March 21st, 23rd, 25th. I'm not going to go through every freaking date on here, but some things worth noting, though. Your first spring scrimmage will be on March 25th. We'll hear from Mike Norvell and staff members afterwards, and then they'll go on a run having a couple of practices, and then Florida State will host their pro day where we'll see a handful of Noles come back to Tallahassee. We had Jamie Robinson on the previous podcast. Great interview. I suggest everybody go listen to that, but he did tell us on the show that he will be there performing at Florida State's pro day this year. So a lot of Seminoles coming back there for that. And of course, I think I'm going to try to make the drive up and help Dustin give some coverage there. But yeah, pro day, there's just nothing better. I wish the media could get a little bit more access. I understand, there's protocols and whatnot, but I wish the media could get kind of like the close access that the scouts get maybe. But yeah, I'm also not a GM or a scout. So
we were a little walled off there on the sideline last year. It was tough to see the bench press, and you're watching the 40-yard dash from 50 yards away. So it's a little tough to get involved in the action, but hey, we'll see what happens this year. Maybe not as many COVID protocols and stuff. I'm not sure.
Yeah, we'll try to make the best of it. Trying to time a 40, Dustin, while looking at it vertically is not the easiest way of doing it. And then also trying to tweet it and be like, I think he ran a 4.51. I don't know, though. It could be like 0.10 seconds off. So
yeah, I think I timed Corbin at like a 6.5, and I'm like, yeah, I don't think that's right.
No, I don't think that's right. Maybe for you? You think you can run a 6.5?
I don't know. Probably not.
He's at least in the 7s.
I'm thinking like a 8.3.
8.3? Come on, man.
Blow my knee out halfway through.
Come on. I expect higher than that. We'll see.
I don't.
Oh, I don't either.
Can we get a run, Dustin run, like they do with Rich Eisen?
Oh, now that would be good. Can we do it for charity? Maybe that's something we can do in 2023.
I need
do this all for
about
charity.
A year and a half of training, something like that.
A year and a half of training.
Strict regiment.
Yeah, maybe that might be the way of doing it. But yeah, that's going to be Florida State's pro day. A lot of Noles coming back for that, so we'll give you guys coverage then. And then to finish it off, that Saturday, just the day afterwards, on April 1st, Florida State will hold their second and final spring scrimmage. We'll be able to speak with the coaches afterwards, as usual. And then Florida State will run 4 more practices until the Garnet and Gold spring game, or like they're calling now the Garnet and Gold spring showcase, since it's not really a game from what we've learned since Mike Norvell's tenure here in Tallahassee. But that'll be on April 15th. And then they'll have one little final hangout, kind of run through some drills, spring practice like they did last year on April 17th. So that's the full schedule right there, D-Lou. Are you excited? Have you had enough of a break now to be like, yeah, I'm ready to get back out to the practice fields?
I think so. Got enough time in February, and, it's crazy. It already feels like December. I mean, I guess it has been a couple of months, but just ready to get that football feeling again, getting a first chance to kind of check out this team, see how guys that have been here for a while are making progress, see how some of the true freshmen from last year have taken a step forward in this tour of duty. You got to think some of the guys in that 2022 class, that some of them didn't get here until the summer. So this is really their first experience with the tour of duty these last couple of weeks. So, I mean, a lot of factors going into the spring, and there's going to be a ton of guys fighting for spots as well when it comes to starting jobs or even just being in the rotation. So I think a lot of exciting storylines kind of to go from here.
There is a ton, and I'm really excited about some of these newcomers. We'll talk about it here when we go through the offensive preview, but when you speak of tour of duty, man, that's no joke. We went there, we saw it, and we got to see a lot of players that stood out to us who ended up having really nice seasons. I'm thinking about Renardo Green. You and I stepped out of that. We stepped out of that workout, and we were like, okay, Renardo Green, hello, fully healthy. I think that was one of the biggest signs we saw early on, but then to see it progress into the football season, it goes to show you can see little signs. Pat Payton too. We were like, holy smokes, Pat Payton put on some size, and it translated into the season. So us going to tour of duty, we might not be able to get photos and videos and all that kind of stuff, but whenever we're able to come on here and describe some of these players and what they've done to their bodies, like Joshua Farmer, who also put on really significant size too at this time.
It's your favorite thing to do, man. Just describe the bodies of grown men.
It is. It is. We have one of our riders down in Miami, Dylan, at the booster tour right now, and he said Tatum Bethune is there with Mike Norvell, and saw a picture the other day of Tatum Bethune looking pretty big. I'm interested to see what he looks like when we see Tour of Duty. I bet he's putting on a little bit of size, and Coach Storms is going to put him through a cut later on. But we got to first look at some of these dudes. But yes, Dustin, my favorite time of the year is to look at guys lifting, sweaty, and looking with big muscles. I'm going to stop it there. Let's move on here to some quick hitters real quick. Florida State opens as a 1-point favorite, guys. 1-point favorite over LSU to kick off their 2023 football season. How are we feeling? Does that seem right? Is that too much? I mean, it's one friggin' point. It's almost 50-50 here. Things are going to change quite a bit. It's only February, but early signs, though, they're giving it to the Florida natives, and the home crowd maybe favorite going into this one before Brian Kelly comes down to Orlando. Again, both teams had played their bowl games in Orlando, so this shouldn't be anything new to them, but definitely the perk goes on Florida State's side. Don't have to travel far whatsoever, and they got the best shot of LSU in New Orleans with a heavy LSU crowd there. And Florida State did bring their crowd for sure, absolutely, but this should be very, very heavy FSU, as we saw at the Cheez-It Bowl, absolutely showing out like crazy, and that was expected. But what do you guys think about this early line, guys?
I can just say, to me, it's fitting. I mean, think about how the game ended last year, 24-23, 1-point game. Shaheem Brown blocks the extra point to secure the victory for Florida State. So it's fitting that would be the opening line for this one. And yeah, I think Florida State, they should have the advantage going into this game. They've beaten this team before. They've got a ton of guys coming back, one of the top transfer classes, if not the top transfer class in the country. So you've got to like FSU's odds going into it, and hope they don't overlook this matchup after beating LSU last year. But just thinking back to it, I mean, FSU was up 17-3 in that third quarter. There were a couple of plays that went the other way where if they don't, Florida State maybe blows out LSU. So we'll see what happens in Orlando in 2023.
No, I agree. And both teams have made improvements from where they were to begin last season. Because honestly, when we were leaving that game in New Orleans, we're all thinking there's a good game between two teams that are like 7-5, 8-4. And, at one point, LSU was a top 5 team last season. So they definitely improved throughout last season, and they also improved this offseason. So I think it makes sense just to leave it at a 1-point game. It's essentially a pick 'em. It should be, once again, a very good game this time in Orlando.
Yeah, maybe one of the biggest games of the year. I mean, I think it's feasible to say that both of these teams enter this game as in the top 10, both of them. Whereas last year, was LSU ranked?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, so neither team was ranked last year, and now it's a top 10 matchup.
It may even be top 5, honestly, depending on how much voting Florida State gets. I don't think any of us are expecting it, but it's not impossible.
Mm-hmm. I don't think it's impossible either, but definitely certainly top 10 matchup, which if looking at the early slate of games in that week 1, this is the winner right here. There's going to be a lot of eyes on this matchup. Two gigantic brands facing in a neutral site. I think it's going to be huge for a lot of college football fans tuning in, and let alone a lot of FSU fans will be going crazy. I don't know what the ticket prices are right now. I don't even know if they're even available, but holy smokes, man. That is, we thought the Cheez-It Bowl was big, and it definitely was, but this one's going to be a whole different animal, gentlemen. This is going to be huge. And Brian Kelly, a second year at his program at LSU, I think this is going to be a better team that should be. But like Tom's saying in the comments, Brian Kelly kind of a little up and down starting the seasons. Things kind of pick up later on. And I think Brian Kelly is a phenomenal coach, one of the best in college football. But if you can get him early on in the season, and Florida State was able to compete, they had a week 0 game, which was really rare. So they kind of already had what was working, had a little bit of film, but you're also facing an opponent that isn't at the talent level as LSU. It's going to be really coach versus coach. If I'm looking early on in this, who's going to coach and have coach the best game plan against their opponent? And I think it's going to be a true test to really tell, where does Mike Norvell rank as a college football coach right now in the college football realm. So I think it's going to be awesome. Tons of really fun storylines. You've got Jordan Travis, Jaden Daniels going against each other once again. Was a thriller last year. I mean, what else can you ask for, man? What else can you really ask for? And we just lost Dustin just like that, Austin. I mean, just tough scenes. Tough scenes.
Yeah, I mean, you really can't ask for more. Like I said, these are two teams that didn't have many expectations last year, and then grew into huge expectations as the season went on. And now it should, like I said, it should be a really, really good game.
Dustin, we lost you there for a second. Didn't know if you weren't excited for this game or not. We were going to have to bring Austin Veazey down to Orlando to cover it for us and let you. But yeah, no, I was just talking about Dustin, how just the anticipation, the hype. Like, you don't even have to hype this game up. It adds that kind of thrill factor to it from what we had last season alone, and bringing in a team that has a ton of expectations in Tallahassee, and also is the same way at LSU with stars on both sides of the field for both teams. I just sign me up, man. These tickets aren't going to be easy to grab. It's just going to be a fun weekend in Orlando.
Even last year, when these two teams weren't ranked coming into this game, I mean, there was a lot of excitement for Florida State fans to get a chance to play LSU, an SEC team, seeing Brian Kelly come down, who had obviously just beaten Florida State the year before in the season opener, and the team that he was able to build through the transfer portal at LSU and everything. And now with this one, I mean, there's nothing you really have to sell. These are going to be two top 5 teams on paper. It looks like this is going to be an extremely competitive game. And, depending on who wins this one, this could start the path to a climb to a potential playoff run for one of these two teams. And I mean, even the loser is still going to have a chance if they win out the rest of the way. So, I mean, yeah, this could be considered a top 5 matchup during the entire season, I feel like. And, it's in week 1.
It is. Sign me up, baby. I'm already ready to be there. But spring camp comes first. We're going to start jumping into that right now. Florida State, like we talked about, not too far away from kicking off their spring practices. And we're going to start off with offense this week. Next week, we'll jump into defense and talk about Jared Verse's defense, I should say, and Fabian Lovitz. But offensively, I think some question marks last year there was a lot of question marks on the offensive side for us. What different stride, what kind of improvements is Jordan Travis going to take? Can he stay fully healthy? That was one on his side of things. And then you look at the wide receiver room after a really disappointing year, the year previous. Are these transfers going to come in and make an impact? Boom, they do that this last year. We're looking at this offense in a whole lot of different ways. What is Trey Benson? What can he even run with that leg? I mean, every FSU fan was freaking about the pickup there that Mike Norvell made, and David Johnson. God forbid they bring in Trey Benson, but he goes in, he balls. So I think we've got a lot of answers that should bring a lot of excitement, Dustin, to this offense, where we're not having a whole ton of question marks anymore. Yeah, there's a few here and there, but you kind of know what you're working with, and you're adding more additions like a Jaheim Bell, Kyle Morlock, also in that tight end room. You've got a Rodney Hill, who I think both of us, Dustin, seeing him in camp, seeing him in practices, are really excited for. Could be a potential breakout guy in the next month or so during camp. There's just not as much question marks from this last year than it is this year, at least offensively.
I think that's a good way to put it. This unit really enters the spring more established. You know what you have in Jordan Travis. You now know what you have in a guy behind him in Tate Rodemaker, who, in the event of an injury, has proved he can step in. You've got guys in the running back room, Trey Benson, Lawrence Toafili, obviously the two studs. But yeah, like you said, Rodney Hill, I think he might end up being an upgrade over Treshaun Ward in the rotation, which honestly, that sounds insane, but I think the kid is that talented. You've got 6 or 7 wide receivers that have now proven themselves. You look at the tight end unit, you've got Jaheim Bell and Kyle Morlock coming in. You've got Marquise and Douglas back, put some gravy on that biscuit. And you've also got Brian Courtney, who made some tremendous strides during practice throughout his true freshman season, and then made a little bit of an impact there down the line, catching that 2-point conversion in the bowl game against Oklahoma. And then on the offensive line, you've got 5 guys coming back who started a combined 44 games last year. You're bringing in 3 very quality transfers, and you've got some other young guys in the ranks, Julian Arbella, Jalen Early, Bryson Estes, who have showed promise as well. So this offense, they've got a lot of faces on there. We're going to kind of see how things shake out as far as the rotation. I think at some positions you kind of already know where guys are going to start, or maybe guys that are going to play a lot. But there's some interesting names throughout the position groups that could also really rise up the ranks starting in this spring.
It's crazy how much a year can make a difference. Last year we are going into it going, man, what's the wide receiver room going to look like? Is Travis ready for the next step? Is the offensive line going to be ready? Now we're coming this season. We know for the most part what the receivers are going to be. You can talk about who's going to replace Pokey Wilson. You know what the tight ends are going to be. You know what the running back room is going to be. And there's going to be some shuffling on the offensive line. We'll talk about it here shortly. But we're a lot more positive than we were this time a year ago. That's for sure.
Absolutely. I'm going to bring up some question marks here that I have going into it. There's not a ton of them, but there's probably two here. My first one is Winston Wright Jr. How available is he going to be? What's his availability going to look like going into this spring? Because we were there at practices, Dustin. We would see him catch balls, and we're like, oh my God, this is going to happen here. Because everybody on Twitter, anything we tweeted about Winston Wright Jr. would fly through the roof with retweets, because there's a lot of excitement for what he can bring to this offense and the deep threat, his speed. And we saw what he did for West Virginia. And can that production come over to a Mike Norvell offense? That would be obviously really exciting to watch. But what is going to be his availability? I'm interested and going to ask, Mike Norvell specifically, kind of what the game plan for him is, because he practically used that whole last season to rehab, and we never got to see him hit the field. Can Florida State get him into the rotation this upcoming season? It's make it or break it now for him. And I'm interested to see what the game plan there is for the speedster from West Virginia. And then probably my other one is going to be, how is Florida State going to utilize and use really Jaheim Bell on Mike Norvell's offense? And I'm interested to see, you could put this guy out wide, you can put him in the slot, you can put him on the line, you can put him in the freaking backfield if you want to. That's how talented he is. I'm just wondering how they're going to use him specifically, and we're really going to find out. We're not going to find out much. Maybe we'll see a little bit in practices, and definitely we get the fall camp when we get that far. But I'm really interested, just first off, the skill set that Jaheim Bell is going to bring into a Mike Norvell offense with a trio of tight ends. This is the first time where I'm actually excited about talking tight ends. We've never gotten excited on here on this freaking show ever. Forever long we've been doing this show, we've never gotten excited about talking about tight ends ever. Nobody in the comments, no one. But now I'm excited about the trio, your first trio, and even a youngin like Brian Courtney coming in. And I don't want people sleeping on Marquise and Douglas, but I think too, Jaheim Bell, how are they going to use him? That's probably two of my question marks going into this camp.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how they use Jaheim. Like you noted, you can put him in the backfield, you can flex him out wide, you can use him as a traditional tight end. So, I mean, this is really a guy that they can move all over the offense. And it's going to be, you got to think about a guy like Mike Norvell, a very creative offensive mind. It's going to be fun to see some of the positions that he ends up putting Jaheim in. And then just going over to Winston Wright, yeah, he used that entire 2022 season basically to rehab, and we got to see him some in practice, and it just never really felt like he was 100% on that leg yet, whether it was still physically or even that mental hump of just getting over the injury. But seeing videos of Tour of Duty and some of his social media posts, it looks like the sleeve is off of that previously injured leg, and now you look at the calendar, you're getting closer and closer to a year removed from when he suffered that injury. By the time the season starts, he's going to be 16, 17 months or so out from the injury. So, I mean, yeah, at this point, you're hoping in the spring he's going to be full go. And he's really a wild card right now because he's a potential replacement for Ontario Wilson if he's able to get back fully healthy. Obviously, a guy who's a speedster, who's proven himself over in the Big 12, both as a receiver and as a guy on special teams, a dangerous returner. So he can make a huge impact on both units if he does come back, and that's going to be something interesting to follow over the first couple of weeks of spring camp, because there's a lot of guys in that wide receiver room.
And arguably his biggest skill set is the one Florida State needs, and that's just someone that can take the top off of defense. We saw what Jordan Travis can do with Pokey Wilson. I think Winston Wright's a little bit more talented than Pokey. So to have a guy that has that speed, has that athleticism, has the abilities he has, if he's fully healthy, it's only going to be good things for this offense. We saw what Pokey did against LSU. We saw what he did against Miami. Hopefully Winston Wright can step right in that role. My biggest question is how the offensive line shakes out, because this is the first time that they have like really good depth, and you're wondering, wow, they've got 7 or 8 guys that could possibly start, but 5 spots. You're only losing Dylan Gibbons from last year. We'll see what happens with Dimitri Emmanuel, but it kind of looks like he's going to be back for next season. And like Dustin mentioned, you're bringing in Jeremiah Byers and Casey Roddick and Keandre Jones as transfers. How does that last left guard spot work out? Does someone get shuffled back to the bench for a guy like Jeremiah Byers to step up? I think that's going to be really interesting to see how that shakes out during spring.
Yeah, it's going to be tough because, I mean, you really have, 8 or 9 potential bona fide starters on that unit. I mean, from the guys coming back, you've got Dimitri Emmanuel, Robert Scott, Maurice Smith, Darius Washington, and Bless Harris, who all started games for Florida State last year. And then coming in, Casey Roddick, Keandre Jones, and Jeremiah Byers, obviously from UTEP. And then think about some young guys in the ranks. Julian Armella, who showed a lot last year during practices, and we thought he was going to work his way into the rotation. Jalen Early as well, Bryson Estes, I mentioned them as well. So, I mean, that's 10, 11 guys fighting for, like you said, 5 spots. We'll see how it shakes out, but that's a good thing for Florida State. And I think Alex Atkins and the rest of that offensive line staff, they've got to be kind of salivating over the amount of combinations they're going to have here. And then when you think back to last year, Florida State was kind of hit with some injuries very, very early. Caden Lyles knocked out during the preseason. Maurice Smith went down at one point during the preseason. It was like, wow, is the season over before it even starts? Florida State's lost both of their centers. Darius Washington dealt with injuries. Bless Harris was out for the season. He was the starting right tackle out for the season after playing against Duquesne.
Remember, D-Lee, we were looking at that. We're like, oh my God, this is over. LSU is just going to rip off the side now out of nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully, Jackson Turnitine is there. So I think it's great that you have 8 very experienced guys where in the event you suffer an injury, 2 injuries, 3 injuries, you've got guys that you can insert in there. And especially when you look at Bless Harris and Darius Washington, even Robert Scott, those are versatile guys. They can both play inside or outside. I think a guy like Jeremiah Byers, who played right tackle at UTEP, he could do the same thing at Florida State. He could move inside. He could play outside. So the flexibility is something that's going to help the Seminoles as well.
100%. Let's jump into quarterbacks real quick. We won't spend so much time. We won't go by through them because I like just regular discussion, open discussion. So if we jump to other positions, that's fine. We'll go off of that. But let's jump into quarterbacks real quick. Jordan Travis, another year with Tony Tokars, and we saw the improvements that both J Trav and Tate Rodemaker took. I know what I'm getting out of J Trav. I don't need to dive into this too far. We're only going into the spring, but for spring, I think it's bigger for younger players. I'm looking at AJ Duffy, man. I'm looking at AJ Duffy, and I'm looking for Brock Glenn to push and be behind his heels because we saw Duffy early on and more of a playful guy, kind of just getting adjusted to maybe the college lifestyle. And then you saw the coaching get a little bit more tougher on him and Mike Norvell being more hands-on with him, Dustin and VZ. But I think biggest thing right now for me, quarterback-wise, going to spring camp is Duffy. Can Duffy make that next stride? And then also Brock Glenn. What are we getting out of Brock Glenn? Will be fun to watch the little bits. And I think it's going to be great to have Duffy with Glenn right behind him. Honestly, this might be the best thing because if you thought about it, Tate Rodemaker was ahead of him. And there was no competitiveness there at all for that. And Duffy was kind of just sitting there behind and, he had the few walk-ons with him, but having a younger guy that a highly touted prospect on the recruiting side of things as a quarterback coming in and coming to compete with you to take a depth spot week by week is going to be fun to watch. But specifically this spring camp, I'm watching Duffy and Glenn, and primarily I want to see improvement out of Duffy because there needs to be improvement.
I agree. I've kind of got it separated into 2 different tiers. On one side, obviously Florida State, they need to protect Jordan Travis during this period. They already know what they have in Jordan Travis, but you've got to think ever since he arrived at Florida State, got under Mike Norvell in 2020, this is a guy who's made strides every offseason, and he's always been able to add something new to his game. So I'm just wondering, going into his final collegiate season at Florida State, what's J Trav going to be able to add this time? Because there's still some things that he can take forward as a quarterback. We'll see what he does, but I'm sure the guy's working hard. We saw today up to 209 pounds. So that's obviously going to be helping as far as durability wise. And then the other thing, you were kind of talking about it, but can Florida State begin to look for their quarterback of the future while knowing what they have in Jordan Travis? You can put Tate Rodemaker, AJ Duffy, and Brock Glenn through a lot this spring. I feel like give them a ton of different reps. If Jordan Travis needs a rest day or something like that throughout the spring, it's kind of a unique opportunity with Jordan coming back and being the unquestioned starter for the second straight year And yeah, like you said, Duffy, he kind of struggled to acclimate at times in 2022. And Brock Glenn, I mean, this is a guy, this was Florida State's top quarterback target. They went out, got him, flipped him from Ohio State. He's coming in with one heck of a mindset on his shoulders. And I mean, that's just to go out there, compete, and try and win the job. And you got to think you've got Luke Kromenhoek committed as well. So a year from now, you're going to have three very talented young signal callers on campus competing for that spot to replace Jordan Travis. A guy like Duffy, a guy like Brock Glenn can begin to set themselves apart beginning right now.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how these young guys work out. As we mentioned, Brock Glenn's coming in. He's going to be pushing these guys. Ideally, you don't want him being the second or third quarterback, though, so as long as Tate Rodemaker and AJ Duffy can continue making those strides, that's really what Florida State needs from the quarterback position this offseason more than anything.
Yep. I've been really impressed with Tokar's, being able to get close with him and talk with him, and to also see what he's been able to do on the field, the product that he had put out with Jordan Travis, and then obviously the game that we've talked about so many times at Louisville with Tate Rodemaker coming back and responding after his interception and winning that game on the road was huge on a Friday night. But really, specifically these two younger guys, I want to see what happens, the kind of chemistry. I'm also looking at Jordan Travis as a vocal leader this year. I think we saw a turn of that a little bit after that 3-game losing stretch. We saw him being a little bit more assertive in practices, definitely going at the defense and chirping up a little bit, something we had never seen in his career whatsoever. He's more kind of kept to himself kind of guy. I think we're going to see more of a vocal leader out of Jordan Travis this upcoming year. Florida State's pushing very hard, getting the Heisman campaign rolling and everything, advertising. I'm seeing not that he's going to be a Jameis Winston kind of vocal. It's very hard to be at the Jameis Winston level, just personality wise and outgoing wise and chatter wise. But I think we're going to see a little bit more of that kind of Jordan Travis this upcoming spring camp, honestly, because I think it's shown to help a lot leadership wise for not only this group, but this team overall. And he's already got the respect of his teammates, but some things need to be told, and they need to be told at that moment to make things change and hold everybody accountable. I'm expecting to see a little bit of a more mouthy Jordan Travis, and I don't think that's a bad thing.
Yeah, I don't think it's been something, it wasn't second nature to him as far as being a leader, but it's something that he's grown into over the last couple of years as he's become more comfortable, as he's grown into a bigger player for this program. And, as he's improved on and off the field. And like you said, you really saw it during practice this last year. If a receiver ran a wrong route or an offensive lineman blocked the wrong guy, a running back hit the wrong hole, Jordan Travis would be quick to go over, put an arm around them, talk about it. They'd go over, look at it on the big board where you've got the video replaying, kind of get on the same page. So, I mean, it's really been impressive because, some guys try and force it, but it's never felt like Jordan Travis has been that guy as a leader. It's always been completely genuine. And, that doesn't mean he doesn't get on his guys. We've seen him go after the defense as well. He's got some fireness to his personality, but it's just really impressive. And I think it also helps that obviously now he's going into his 5th year at Florida State. So he's kind of seen it all at this point.
And a lot of leadership comes from confidence. You could argue there's no quarterback playing better football in the country than Jordan Travis, other than maybe Caleb Williams and a couple other guys. The better you're playing, the more you're going to be assertive in taking those roles and getting guys in the right spots and making sure they're doing the right things.
I think that's a good point. Let's run over to running backs. Biggest name here, you lose Trayshawn Ward, but you have Trey Benson coming back for another year. That was huge. This is a guy that I think could have gone. I think it was better for him to come back for another year, so that he can do this again for another season. It's going to put him on a higher draft board than what he would have gone or where he would have gone this year in this upcoming draft in April. But Trey Benson coming back for another season, how big is that for this offense? And understanding, Mike Norvell, his offense is usually predicated around sharing carries with other running backs, but just specifically Trey Benson and what he brings to this offense and how he can change games just like that. How does that impact going into the spring?
I think it's huge because now Trey Benson doesn't have to acclimate himself. He doesn't have to prove himself. Whenever Florida State entered the season last year, you were still kind of trying to figure out who's the head of this 3-headed monster. Is it Trey Benson? Is it Trayshawn Ward? Is it Lawrence Toafili? And finally, unfortunately for Ward, whenever he went down Benson finally got the shot as the feature back, and I mean, absolutely ran away with it during the second half of the season, coming up just short of a 1,000-yard season. I mean, man, one more decent run against Oklahoma, and he gets there. But think about it. He hadn't really had any college experience at that point, was coming off a major knee injury. Now he's going to be another year removed from that, already has a year of experience in Florida State's system. And I think he's really just starting to reach the ceiling that he has as a running back. You know, he still needs to hit running lanes better. There's still some different aspects of his game that he can take steps forward at. And I think he saw that coming back for another year, working with Mike Norvell, working with David Johnson, who have put so many guys in the NFL level who are having success up there. That's going to help him take that next step and really have another, maybe even we'll call it another breakout campaign this season. And it's going to help to have a guy like Lawrence Toafili, who's been here for a couple years, and a guy like Rodney Hill, maybe even Keziah Holmes flanking him to help him out.
Yeah, as you talked about, he still needs to hit running lanes a little bit better. We saw it in both the LSU game and the Oklahoma game, where sometimes he just dances around a little bit too much, try to get east-west, where sometimes he just needs to hit that hole and go. Another offseason is going to help. Having confidence in the knee for a full offseason is going to help. We really don't know where the confidence was in his knee this time last year. Mm-hmm. Now he's had a full season under his belts, and he can get back to being I think he can easily be a 1,100, 1,200-yard rusher if he stays fully healthy.
Yep, if he can stay fully healthy, for sure. I'm looking at, too, like you were talking about, Keziah Holmes, someone that we really haven't seen much of at all. Didn't get to play last season. Penn State transfer. Penn State usually will trot out some pretty damn good running backs. I'm interested to see what Penn State saw in him, and then the now availability, him coming into Tallahassee and being a full go. I really liked his press conference. I see a lot of confidence, at least coming from that press conference when we were covering it, a lot of confidence in him. He says he has a lot of play style similar to Trey Benson, and that says a lot, but he says he has his own kind of characteristics that he has that he can bring onto the game field on Saturdays. But just a lot of confidence is coming from Holmes, and that says a lot to a room that is already stacked with talent. You look at CJ Campbell too. We've talked about Rodney Hill. I think that's one of my nominees for breakout player during the camp. But yeah, I'm interested to see D-Lou, because we get questions all the time about him, but we only got to see him going against the practice squad, or you're going against the 3s, the 4s. You're just not going to get the reps because you're not going to see the field on a Saturday. But you can see the physical attributes, but I'm not going to evaluate anything until we get to see him running with the 2s, the 1s, everything like that.
Right. It seems like that's everyone's favorite player already on social media or in our Discord. Everyone's talking about Keziah Holmes, and it's just like, hey, we need to slow this down a little bit, because he didn't really play much at Penn State in 2021 while dealing with some injuries, was on the practice squad this past year. And I mean, he did earn offensive scout team player of the year. I think he shared it with Geno English. I mean, obviously Florida State saw some things in practice, and we're going to see how he kind of transitions over here, actually getting reps with the first team, the second team. And yeah, we'll see how it goes from there. But right now, my favorite kind of to replace Treshaun Ward in the rotation, maybe even more than what Ward was able to produce last year, which is crazy to say, because I mean, this is a guy who has been a starter, obviously right there in the rotation the last couple of years behind Corbin in 2021, started out as a starter this year, lost it to Trey Benson, has led Florida State in average yards per carry the past 2 years. So, I mean, it's going to be no easy task, but Rodney Hill, he just has all the talent in the world. And I mean, yeah, damn good player.
But, one thing I'm going to keep an eye on too, and I'm going to ask this to Norvell or whoever I can during that press conference next Friday, is what they're going to do with Joshua Burrell, a guy that's been dealing with injuries. I'm interested to see if he's going to stay fully at running back. They're going to put him at wide receiver. He's going to be a hybrid, just kind of how they were with Ja'Kai Douglas. I'm interested to see. I think specifically they're going to keep him at running back to start off with this spring camp. Might be a shot in the dark there. I don't know. I'm just taking a guess, just going off of a few things, but that's something at least position-wise.
What are you going off of that gives you that idea? Going off of a few things.
Pictures.
Pictures of what?
of people with people. I can't go into full detail, but yeah, no, that's something I'm just questioning. I don't need to talk about it anymore, but I just need to know these things, man. I need to know them for future pieces, as position changes, they get a lot of views. So just need to see what's going on with Brill. I just don't know what they want to do with that kid, but I just want a fully healthy Brill. Can I ask any more of that? I want to give this kid a fully healthy, because remember we were talking about him at wide receiver and Anquan Bolden type build, not going to be the fastest guy that's going to burn you, but he's going to take down those contested catches.
Yeah.
I'm just interested to see what they do with him, what the game plan is for him.
My prediction is he sticks at running back. If I had to
That's
say
what I'm
guess.
feeling too.
This might be a crazy take. Is there a chance is there a chance to try to make him like a Jaheim Bell 2.0? Because he's only about 10 pounds lighter.
That's what I was going to say. I literally was going to say something in Jaheim Bell's realm. I don't know if he's got the talent attributes.
Yeah, but he's only 10 pounds lighter, has a similar skill set. They're maybe an inch difference height-wise. Could they try and do something like that? Just a guy that can play all over the field, wide receiver, tight end, running back, wherever?
I don't know.
That's why we have spring camps, baby. I guess we'll find out soon. I'll be able to tell you on here, VZ. I don't know.
Either way, just hope he figures it out, because obviously he's dealt with some setbacks injury-wise. His first 2 years at Florida State hasn't been able to record an offensive statistic yet. And if you guys remember back, dating back to when he was a high school recruit and committed to Florida State, this was a guy, a major bell cow for FSU at the time. So it would be good to see things work out for him in Tallahassee.
Jump over to the wide receiver room, gentlemen. Was the biggest question mark on offense this last year, I would say. I mean, damn, go in the transfer portal, you make these additions, you don't even have your, end quote, your best transfer at the wide receiver room, with Winston Wright Jr. not being available at all last year. And then you still get that production. Oh my God, I'm dying. But it's not fun, like breathing in your own spit. I highly suggest no one do that. But going into that room, though, Micah Pittman coming in, Johnny Wilson having the season that he did, and then Deuce Spann. I think for me, my question mark out of this room is going to be Deuce Spann. Can he take that next step? Because we were just talking about earlier, taking the top off of a defense. Deuce Spann should be able to do that alongside if Winston Wright Jr. is fully healthy. You add that on there, man. I mean, goodness gracious, you've got gadgets in every type of scenario for what you want to do. Short gain, mid gain, red zone, deep threat, a lot of different kind of talents and advantages you can take as an offensive coordinator like a Mike Norvell to go against your opponents and defenses. But I think my biggest thing is Deuce Spann. Can he take that next step in that rim? Because I kind of already know what I'm going to get out of Micah, Johnny. I want to see more consistency out of Johnny, but specifically Deuce Spann. That's my question mark. Will that next step be made? And I really do think it will be.
This is an interesting one, right? Because Florida State, I mean, man, so much talent coming back in this room. You aren't losing Ontario Wilson, who played a crucial role last year, and you're losing Malik McLean, who was kind of a spot starter and also heavily involved there in that wide receiver rotation. But I mean, man, like you said, Logan, Florida State, so many different guys that they can use in so many different scenarios in that wide receiver core. The big one for me is, can Johnny Wilson just become a little bit more consistent when it comes to catching the ball? That, there were some drops last year. And yeah, like you said, there's some other guys. Deuce Spann, you want to see him become a little bit more consistent. I think a big one for me, Kentron Poitier really made some impressive plays last year. And I mean, man, 6'4", a guy who can really go down there and help Florida State as a deep threat. With Ontario Wilson and Malik McLean kind of shifting out for Florida State, can he kind of step in there? And a Winston Wright, who I mentioned earlier as a wild card. I mean, man, you can just talk about this position group forever. What's Hakeem Williams going to do? The 5-star early enrollee who's already on campus. Vondravius Jacobs led the state of Florida in receiving yards and touchdowns as a high school senior. He's here too. So, I mean, man, there's just talent, experienced talent, young talent, kind of in the middle, developing talent. When you think of a guy like Deuce Spann, who's still kind of figuring out all of the characteristics of playing wide receiver after beginning his college career at quarterback. So much for Florida State to work with here. A lot of excitement. And Austin said it earlier on the podcast. We wouldn't have been saying that a year ago when we were going into spring ball. There were so many questions like, are these guys going to be good enough? And I think they are.
Yeah, to your point about Poitier, he was second on the team in yards per reception and second on the team in receiving touchdowns. He came on in a big way last season that I don't think any of us saw coming. And he made some really impressive catches, especially in the red zone. Like Dustin said, there's so much talent in this room, even just all the way down to the freshmen between Hakeem Williams, Goldie Lawrence, Vandrevius Jacobs. Just a ton of talent in this room. It's going to be interesting to see how it all rotates throughout the game and who they're relying on down the stretch in the fourth quarter if it comes to that.
Tom's asking on here, which one of the new wide receivers do you think stand out? He said he's going with Vandrevius Jacobs. I'm also going with Vandrevius Jacobs. Hakeem Williams is Hakeem Williams. I think through his career there, Vandrevius Jacobs is gonna prove a lot of people wrong. This kid is really, really good. You're gonna have to put on a little bit of size, and I'm not expecting him to make that jump this year. No, but I think a guy that can stand out maybe later in the spring, we'll go into fall camp. I think I'll be like, okay, yeah, once he gets another year under his belt, this is going to be a star in the making for Florida State's offense for Mike Norvell in the future.
I think Jacobs comes in a little bit more polished as a wide receiver than Hakeem, but the athletic attributes that Williams brings are just eye-popping off the charts. And if he can figure it out, how to track balls, how to run crisp routes, he's going to be very useful for Florida State very early on. But just the raw athleticism, I don't know if you're going to be able to keep off the field.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, y'all were just talking very highly of Portier there. I'm giving a bold prediction here. I wouldn't be shocked to see him in the starting unit in 2023 kicking off against LSU. Not be shocked.
Don't hate it.
All right, let's go over to tight end, which, wow, I'm not bored right now. I'm not about to fall asleep. I'm not going to be disappointed or anything. I'm jumping right now, being able to talk about this tight end room, both in newcomers, guys that have already been here, and then some younger guys that we saw make those strides this last season, like Brian Courtney. Let's jump into the biggest name in this room, it feels like, and not the biggest guy, Marquise Douglas, but Jaheim Bell. He transfers over from South Carolina, was getting hit up from a lot of schools across the country, as he should, just the talent that he brings and what he could bring to an offense. But he specifically decides to come to Tallahassee and play for Mike Norvell. Why do you think that is? He decides to pick Tallahassee and finish off his college career at Florida State. Why do you think that is specifically?
Well, I said it.
Tight end, because this is the first time you've seen a playmaker at the tight end position. I love, we're going to have Cam McDonald on here on our next episode next week, but
Spoiler.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
But we're at this point of the show now where we can kind of just tease things, and it better happen though. I'll tell you what, if he I'll text him right now if he caps out on us. But this is a playmaker at the tight end position. Florida State fans have been waiting for this for a very long time, going back to, you could say, the Nick O'Leary days. Let's just be honest here. This is the kind of caliber talent that Jaheim Bell, different player than Nick O'Leary, but just playmaker-wise at that position, that's what Bell's going to bring. What do you think he picked Florida State in this offense, man?
I mentioned it earlier, but I think it's just the creativity of Mike Norvell as a head coach, and understanding that he's going to be able to be used in a ton of different ways in Tallahassee, not just as a traditional tight end, but also in certain aspects that fit him as a player, that are going to be able to showcase him and what he can do for the next level as well. South Carolina, they kind of used him as well, flipped him to running back at one point when they were dealing with some injuries, but they were more vanilla with how they utilize his skill set. And I think Norvell sees something really unique with Jaheim that could potentially unlock something that Florida State hasn't had at tight end over the past couple of years.
Yeah, I just think Norvell did a great job of selling Bell what he could be in this offense. Like Dustin said, someone that can move around all over the field and not be relied upon as one of the only playmakers, kind of like he was in South Carolina. We just talked about with the running backs, the wide receivers, and even Jordan Travis as a running threat. There's so many options for this offense, and you plug Bell in there, it's just one more thing for the defense that they have to worry about.
Yeah, going back to, maybe we'll go to Kyle Morlock, and then we'll go to some guys that had been with the program for a little while, like Marquise Douglas, Brian Courtney. Kyle Morlock, a guy that Florida State was able to recruit to 6'7", 250. Still good. I think we talked to him most recently during his introductory press conference into Florida State, said he's going to work on putting on some more size too with Coach Storms. Came in a little bit thinner than what his roster had said previously, but a guy that maybe is more of your traditional type of tight end. I would say, more maybe the athletic side of things than just a traditional holding down the fort like maybe a Marquise Douglas does and blocking scenarios and schemes. But he kind of brings a different versatility to what maybe Mike Norvell has wanted to do at the tight end position. And this is, you can kind of have Johnny Wilson over here. You can have Kyle Morlock on this side. You got Portier. You've got towers everywhere, but Kyle Morlock more thinner and doesn't have maybe the athletic. I don't know. He still has athleticism. I'm just trying to figure out what maybe there are changes with Jaheim Bell. I think we're going to figure it out when we have a spring camp type of deal. But Kyle Morlock, a nice addition to this offense, though.
Yeah, I do want to point out, like you said, came in undersized compared to what he was listed at shorter college, which pun, but anyway, 6'6", 230 pounds for Kyle Morlock. Yeah, he's more of your guy that's, attached to the offensive line at the end of the line of scrimmage, a guy who he's going to need to improve as a blocker, but led shorter college in receiving the last 2 seasons. Going to be kind of interesting because he's making that transition from D2 to the FBS. So there's certainly going to be a learning curve, and he's going to be practicing against better talent, obviously playing against better talent than he ever has before in his college career. So it's going to be a little interesting. Jared Verse, you kind of already saw on paper what this dude could do, and you saw it on film at Albany as well. It seemed like he had the athletic traits to instantly transition and make an impact for Florida State. I'm wondering if Morlock is doing the same thing because he's coming from a level even further than Jared Verse was, Verse FCS, Morlock D2. So, that's no transition to scoff at. He's got the size, but yeah, I'm interested to see how he begins to transition this spring, especially when we're going to get into these returning guys. You've got some guys coming back with experience who are also talented, and I think are going to give Morlock a run for his money.
Ideally, he's your tight end 2 this season, and if he is, it's a totally different tight end 2 than we've seen these past couple of years. He's not a Jordan Wilson or a Wyatt Rector where it's just this straight inline blocking tight end that you're using on counters to push through the gaps. This is a guy that's going to be a receiving threat if he can reach that potential that Dustin says he has.
And Marquise Douglas, someone that was a nice surprise, maybe nothing too crazy, but Marquise Douglas making that next step, worked on his body a ton, lost some weight, and was surprisingly really reliable in the hands, man. I was like, okay, Marquise Douglas, and we saw Florida State utilizing him a lot more in the passing game during these spring and fall camps. I'm like, dang, Norvell's really building some trust here with Marquise, and you saw him make some plays this last year. Marquise going to come back for another year. I think another camp will be huge for him. And then you've got Brian Courtney too, who a lot of outlets like him and his athleticism, his grit. I think he really runs some nice routes too for a tight end at his size. There should be a lot of excitement for this room going into this camp, but it definitely is highlighted, I think, for returning players with Marquise Douglas making that next step. We just launched our show Calculated Chaos with 2013 national champion Brian Stork, and Brian was talking about specifically Marquise Douglas, and he sees a lot of attributes that are similar to Nick O'Leary, and that's saying quite a bit because, Brian Stork, one of his best friends being Nick O'Leary, I just don't see him saying that a lot about other players. And for him to say that about Marquise, and he likes him a lot, and that's a film guy. He's a nerd. He nerds out at film. Watches maybe too much of it. He would probably admit that. But for him to have those kind of nice things to say about him and give him some love, I think is huge. But Marquise Douglas has to make another step too, and helping out that offense.
Agree with that. And another guy you can't forget about, Jarrell Powers, who started to make some strides there at the end of his true freshman season. And, someone we're all still forgetting about who's around, Jackson West. I believe he was at the end of the season that he put out on Instagram, the surgery stuff. So I'm not sure if he'll be a full go during the spring at this point, coming back from what looked like an ankle surgery. And I think it was December or whatever. But regardless, coming back from an injury that kept him out for basically, the entire 2022 season, didn't end up playing a snap for Florida State last year. But someone who was touted out of high school, and injuries have just kind of beaten him to the curb so far. So we'll see if he's able to
Damn.
See if he can work his way back into the rotation.
Okay, I wasn't really expecting that. Jeez, that one got me. I was like looking at a whole different screen, and that one came out a little brutal there, Dustin. A little brutal, but damn,
Oh, and Preston Daniel he's still around.
Yeah, he's still around. It's kind of hard to believe.
he is.
I mean, to your point about Marquise and Douglas, I think a lot of teams were surprised when he started appearing in games of using him as a receiving threat. Because you see this guy that comes in that's 6'4", 270, just this his nickname's Biscuit for a reason. He's a big old blob, and he's just coming out there making great
Whoa.
catches. He's doing great in the screen game. He's surprisingly agile. I think another offseason is going to do him some huge favors. And to your point earlier about Norvell's creativity offensively, he was so creative with what they did with Douglas this season. I can only imagine what they're going to do this season.
I'm glad you brought up Jarrell Powers, D-Lou, because he's on my list here of potential players to break out alongside Rodney Hill. I think Jarrell Powers, what we saw him making those plays, I think it was huge to have bowl game prep, man. And it goes to show how much we saw some improvements from some of these younger players during that bowl game practice. Another month, and Jarrell Powers was getting a lot of opportunities and making some big time grabs over Jamie and Akeem Den at the safety position, bringing those down, and was making some big time plays. He was really impressive there during that bowl game prep. So I definitely got Rodney Hill and also Jarrell Powers. I've got one more, and it's going to be on this offensive line that we're going to transition over to, unless y'all have anything more to talk about the tight end room. That was an exciting segment there. I mean, that was fun.
Best tight end segment we've had in quite some time.
Ever.
I was about to say, as a podcast.
Yeah, ever. I've never been able to talk that highly and have true excitement walking out there and seeing them. So we'll keep an eye on that. Let's jump into the offensive line to finish off the offense. Florida State, making all those moves. VZ, you were bringing up earlier, all the transfers that they brought in. Now, what's the biggest question mark for you guys going into this one? I think VZ, you brought it up earlier, yours, but what do you think, D-Lou, stands out to you? It doesn't really have to be a question mark, but what really stands out to you going into spring with Alex Atkins' offensive line, where we all agreed earlier, it seems like there's depth, but there's even better talented depth there, and still some young guys that still need to go out there and prove themselves and make that next step.
I think what really stands out to me on paper is just the amount of experience that Florida State is bringing back, as far as guys that have already been members of the program, and then as well as the transfers that they're bringing in as well. I mean, we've talked about Florida State's offensive line and the rise that this room has been on over the last couple of years. And I think you can comfortably say, especially if Dimitri Emmanuel gets that waiver for an additional year, that this is the best offensive line room, at least right here, looking at it in the spring, that FSU has had in 10 years.
More
maybe,
than that, I think.
Maybe more. I mean, like I said earlier, there's 8 experienced guys who have a bona fide chance to start, and then there's some interesting young talent behind that Florida State is going to be developing for the future, or maybe even the present, if one of those guys really impresses and breaks into the rotation. And I mean, even further behind that, think back to that 2022 class. You've got 5 redshirt freshmen right now on the team. You've got Lucas Simmons, a 6'7" international recruit from Sweden, who's already enrolled and going through the tour of duty and going to be there for spring. So, I mean, from top to bottom, just kind of like the wide receivers, there's experience at the top, there's talent to be developed at the bottom, and feels like this unit is set up not only for now, but for future seasons as well. So, I mean, you've got to be excited for what Florida State is going to field in 2023, but then the building blocks are also there for 24, 25. I mean, Alex Atkins, Norvell, the recruiting staff, they've done a really good job of stacking this room to, like I said, compete now and maybe even be better later.
With so much talent in that room, would you be surprised if after spring someone leaves?
It wouldn't surprise me.
No.
But at the same time, I think you can pitch that you're going to have 8 or 9 guys consistently involved with how Florida State has dealt with injuries the past couple of years. It's just going to happen at some point. Someone is going to go down that you don't expect, or you're going to suffer a season-ending injury during the preseason. That's just kind of been the luck for Florida State as of late. So I think there's a real pitch to keep, 9 contributors, maybe even 10.
No, for sure. It's just, a lot of guys want to play right away. So I'm just curious to see if we see any movement, especially in this room, because there's a ton of guys in this room. I think what is it up to, Dustin? 19 scholarship offensive linemen?
18 right now.
18. This is a lot of bodies.
That is a ton of bodies.
It's a lot of bodies and a lot of body mass.
Yeah, I mean, I just try and think back on it. Like when you look at the guys maybe deeper in the rotation, maybe someone like Zane Herring, Thomas Schrader, I think are two guys that would jump. But Bryson Estes, it seems like he's got a role with this program. Julian Armella obviously has a role. Jalen Early is working his way there. And then when you look at the top 8, the 5 guys that are returning and the 3 guys that Florida State are adding in, I think none of those guys will probably end up transferring because they understand the roles that they're going to play this upcoming season. It's going to be interesting, to say the least. Like I said, there's so much flexibility, versatility amongst this group. I mean, you look at Casey Roddick, he can play center. He can play either guard spot. I talked about Jeremiah Byers. Keandre Jones can play either guard spot. We got guys across the roster. I mean, Darius Washington, we saw him work from tackle to guard. He played center sometimes. I don't think he liked playing center, and I think he's hoping he does not have to play center because Atkins was getting on him during practices. But
I believe Roddick even played right tackle a little bit at Colorado.
I think it was left tackle.
Was it? Oh man.
Someone do their research on that one. One name that I'm going to add to the breakout list is going to be Armella, and it really depends too on his recovery, dealing with an injury, and he's in the rehab process. And I don't know how much that will really take effect in spring and the camp and his availability. But just overall, this off season, I need to see. I want to see a fully healthy Julian Armella, because I'll be honest with you guys, someone that was giving Jared Verse some fits here and there was true freshman Julian Armella. And Julian Armella had to do a lot of learning. Coach Atkins very hands-on with him. But, what I love about Mike Norvell and allowing the media to have all of this access and for us to be there for the entirety of these practices is be able to go from position group to position group whenever they're doing individual drills and hands-on stuff. And I'll be able to go over there and listen to Coach Atkins and Armella. And, Coach Atkins, this isn't tennis. We're not doing golf thing. It is not fun being out there and getting chewed out, and you are going to get chewed out. But what I love about Julian Armella is he will go up and he will listen and he'll move forward to him into that conversation. He won't step back. He's not putting his head down. And I really respect that. And I don't see that out of a lot of the other freshmen. Yeah, they do listen, but Julian Armella will take that step forward. He will take the beating. And I think Atkins obviously has growing respect for Armella because he was right behind and that second group for Florida State. Obviously, Darius Washington having the most experience, he would be subbed into games and whatnot. But whenever Scott would be hurt on the tackle position, Julian Armella would jump into there and practice and take over that role. So there's a lot of trust there already built with Coach Atkins, and we just know the physical attributes he brings. But, man, he was giving a lot of fits to some of those defensive ends, specifically Jared Verse, absolutely pissing him off, and I thought that was great, and it shows good signs for what's to come out of Julian Armella. I just don't know when that opportunity will come, but for him to continue to make growth, and I think he has a potential to break out either if he's fully available this spring, if not this fall camp. But really the biggest focus, get healthy, man. Get healthy, because that's a talented tackle that you want to keep in your program for as long as you can.
The competition is only going to help him because I think Florida State sees it. This is more another bridge year, I think, to kind of develop a guy like Armella, develop Jalen Early, develop Lucas Simmons, because those 3 are really your offensive tackles of the future right now when you look at this offensive line room. And I mean, at least one of those guys, maybe even 2 of them, are going to need to be prepared to take over a starting job or at least a spot in the rotation in 2024. It might happen this season, depending on the injury luck. So we'll just have to see. But Florida State, I think they've done a good job of stacking this room. Last year, 21 scholarship offensive linemen. Maybe they can go grab another 1 or 2 out of the transfer portal if the numbers hit up right. But right now, 18 with 8 bona fide experienced guys. I think Florida State in a very good spot.
Anything else? Offensive line?
Yeah, what about fullback?
Yeah, I mean, we can jump into a little DJ Lundy package. I mean, I can't say it always delivers now, but it's
I got to tell you guys,
3 out of 4, 3 for 4. I think
yeah,
success rate 75%.
3 or 4 or 4 out of 5.
Yeah,
One of them got
it's pretty good. It's a damn good package system.
You've got DJ Lundy coming back, but I had a dream last night.
Okay.
And
Fabian Lovett at fullback,
Oh, the fridge part
short
too?
yardage, goal line package. I don't know why. I had a dream about it last night. Him and DJ Lundy were back there together.
That's
Trey
crazy.
Benson at
Together?
running back.
I mean,
Jesus.
honestly, I would
What is it, like
like
1,000 pounds by then?
You're getting up there.
I would like it. So there was times in goal line where we were like, where there wasn't enough strength, enough push. You know, you throw Fabian in there just to toss a body around. I think that'd be kind of fun.
That's what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
his
You-
base.
We
You
should have
pave
done
a
with
hole.
we should have done with Robert Cooper. Is what we should have done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to bring in some other guys on defensives like Iobame Tafasi, who's an absolutely Greek freak looking animal as a true freshman, but just the strength and legs. Yeah, Fabian Love would be able to push you in there. Why not just do what they've been doing in Philadelphia with Jalen Hurts? Just get two bodies behind you and just push you right through. That also helps too. You have one of the best, if not the best, offensive line in football in front of you there. But, you know, Maurice Smith has proven to do something. We haven't even talked about Maurice Smith, but I think it's great to have him back. He's a phenomenal leader for that room, guys. You're losing Dylan Gibbons, but you have Maurice Smith in there too. And you also, of course, you have Robert Scott, but I think Maurice Smith, just being at practices, seeing him hands-on with some of the freshmen and holding them accountable, you know, something I can't bring up on here, but he will hold you accountable to make sure you get to those workouts in the morning, because if not, it screws up everybody in that position group, and y'all are all screwed running after practice. But yeah, he holds a lot of that offensive line accountable, and I'll be honest with you guys, he impresses me with the size difference that he has, definitely when he's going against a Fabian Lovett or like last year with Robert Cooper. You know, him battling and being able to hold his ground is really, really impressive. So that, alongside his leadership, being the glue this upcoming year, will be huge, and keeping him healthy will be key, because we talked about it after he got hurt, D-Lou, in Jacksonville. We thought this season was done. It was a wrap. It was over. And it just goes to show that maybe we kind of don't talk about Maurice Smith and give him his roses sometimes, give him his flowers and whatnot. But that man, you know, he lays it on the line, and he tries his hardest to stay healthy, and he goes against some nasty mother effers in the ACC on the defensive line. He does a pretty well job. So I got to give him his props before we head into spring camp.
I wouldn't say that. I feel like I've always given Maurice Smith love, dating back to his very first start against Boston College in 2019, and the very first time we saw J-Trav as well. I've always been very impressed with him. Like you said, his ability to compete despite maybe the size differential, because I mean, when you stand up next to him, you know, he's as tall as you, he's as tall as me, not much bigger than either of us, but he's out there and he's really improved over the last couple of years. And it really just feels like, you know, if he can put on that 15 or 20 pounds, bulk up a little bit, he'd be a little bit more of a stalwart there in the middle for Florida State. But regardless, like you said, a big leader on and off the field, and very dependable for the Seminoles there in the middle of that offensive line.
Agreed. Anything else, gentlemen, spring camp offensive side wise that you want to bring up before we move over to the best part of the podcast, where we talk about Florida State basketball?
Oh God. Dustin's thinking of anything he can to stall it.
He's trying to find like which walk-on might come out of nowhere and be a star. Who could break out? Which preferred walk-on might get a scholarship? All right, Austin, we'll give you a chance here. Let's give a good quick 5 minutes. Or actually, I know you're not doing a recap of any games or looking ahead probably, but what's going on with FSU basketball? You have a piece that's coming out. We're going to post that, I think, tomorrow. But what's going on? What's going on with Florida State basketball? What is your opinion? What needs to be done?
Good Lord, where do we start? I mean, you're coming off a game where you lose by 40 to Clemson, and then you lose at home to Boston College, who sucks. Like, I'm not going to beat around the bush. That's not a good basketball team. Like, you can't – I get Matthew Cleveland hasn't played these last two games. He's not worth 40 points against Clemson. And you should be able to beat Boston College without Matthew Cleveland. It's just – there's a lot going on, and I know there's a lot of fans very upset, including myself. And for everywhere from don't bring back Coach Ham to disband the whole program. I've seen everything in between. It's a complete mess of a season that's been affected from injuries, missed evaluations, to attrition, if you want to look past these last few years, the scheme. It's just everything. The defense is terrible. They're not communicating. They're not trying. The offense is a mess. There's no true leaders. There's no true guards. There's one three-point shooter in Darren Green Jr. who feels like he's doing everything possible to get open. You have a center in Naheem McLeod that doesn't know how to dunk. I've never seen anything like it. It's a complete mess, and we'll talk about it more after the season. I've talked about it in the Discord some. This roster is going to change a lot this offseason. We're talking 5 to 6 guys leaving. And that's opening spots for transfers, which Coach Hamilton's been very honest about. We should have bought in heavier to the transfer portal instead of bringing in 5 freshmen for this team. They need guys next year that can play and play immediately. Anywhere between 2 and 4 starters. You'd like to have Darren Green Jr. be your only returning starter next season, maybe. If we're expecting Matthew Cleveland to go to the league and whatever else as far as transfers. Because as much as talented as I think guys like Caleb Mills and Jalen Worley are, they're just not fits for this system. And I think it's been shown this season. Some of the layups Mills has taken this season, I'm like, what in the hell are you doing? I mean, he is double pumping under the rim, and it hits the top of the backboard and goes on the other side. I'm like, what?
Something I would do. That's me right there.
What did I just see? And I get a lot of fans want a new coach. I don't think it's happening. It's been a very consistent, Hamilton's going to get a chance to fix this mess. We'll see if that changes over the next 2 weeks. There's only 3 games left plus an ACC tournament game. But if you think about it, this is the first time Florida State's been horrendous in a long time. Coach Hamilton is he's vastly exceeded expectations at Florida State. He can have one bad year, and I think he's going to get that chance. As much as fans don't want to hear that, but he's going to get that chance. He built Florida State up from when it was the worst program in college basketball, coming off the Steve Robinson years. And he's been very candid that he has a plan in place. Will Alford give him that chance? I think he will. He's only got 1 year left on his deal, and I really can't see Florida State paying 2 basketball coaches and 2 football coaches, considering they're still paying Taggart this year.
Mm-hmm.
As much as fans don't want to hear it, I don't think he's going nowhere, and I think he should stay for 1 more year. If they don't make the tournament next season, you can move on. No hard feelings. His contract's up anyways. You can just go find a new coach. If you try to force him out this season, it's going to get ugly. I'm just going to be honest. That's one of the living legends in the sport. A guy that broke a ton of barriers in college basketball. Not even just basketball in general. Being the first African-American assistant at Kentucky. That was huge for that program. Then he built up Oklahoma State. Then he built up Miami. And now he's done this for Florida State for 21 years. He has half as many tournament appearances in the entire history of Florida State basketball. He's given us the best team we'll arguably ever see in our lifetimes in 2020. That team was unreal. And I'll talk about that team in the article tomorrow on just what made that team so good and why this team is not capitalize on that team's success. He's going to get another shot, and he deserves it as much as people don't want to hear it.
I will say Florida State pushed out Bobby Bowden after he made a bowl game.
That had lingered for 3 years though? Because even you could talk about it with Ham.
Right, longer than that.
Yeah, but you could talk about it with Ham where last year the team wasn't that good, but it's really because just injuries just sucked the life out of the team. They were first in the ACC at the end of January with a 6-2 ACC record. Then Malik Osborne goes down. Then Matthew Cleveland goes down for a couple games. Then Caleb Mills goes down with an ankle injury. Then whoever else it was. I know I have that in the article coming out tomorrow as well. Just last year, there were so many injuries. So they had that excuse. This year, that's not as much of an excuse. It's just been bad basketball from the start. Losing to Stetson, losing to Troy, losing to whoever else was in the beginning of the season because I've tried to block out as much of it as possible. That's not as big of an excuse, even if it is still partially an excuse. Chandler Jackson missed the first few games getting back from that thumb injury and still wasn't 100% until late December, early January. Yeah, Baba Miller missed the first 16 games. Ever since he's came back, he's just been checked out because he has no idea what he's doing offensively, what his role is in the system. Deontay Green came back from his ACL injury sooner than he should have. You had all these guys that were still banged up, still trying to figure out what they're doing. And Florida State's not one of those teams recently that can play with just 6 or 7 guys. This is a team that's built on 10, 11 guys playing a hard 18 to 24 minutes. And they just don't have that right now. That's what I'm saying. They have to go get 4 guys that can play right away this offseason. And I've also heard the argument of, why would anyone come play for Florida State when they're having this bad of a season? Look at Pitt. Pitt's been the worst team in the ACC the last 4 or 5 years. Capel brings in 3 transfers, and they're the best team in the ACC right now. Like, if they're willing to go play for Coach Capel, who I was shocked even got brought on for another season, they'll come play for a guy like Coach Hamilton, as respected as he is.
Yeah, he's got the respect around the whole college basketball world. And then I'm just wondering too, when do you think? How do you get your team back on track here? Because it feels like you were saying,
there's no getting back on track this season.
Well, not this season, but not this season, but how do you build that back to say, all right, let's get back on track and things got to go back in order how they used to be? Because we used to respect the hell out of, and we still do, this is a season, but Leonard Hamilton, he ran a tight ship and he built a family bond around it, but it doesn't seem like that might be the case anymore. How do you bring that back though? I'm just wondering, definitely if you're going to be switching up your I guess you are cleaning out your roster and you're bringing in newcomers, and you got to hope they believe in that.
You got to find some leaders, some guys that'll step up, get guys where they're supposed to. I get the gold standard is Trent Forrest, but he's the gold standard for a reason, because those last 2 seasons, he was doing everything you want out of a leader of a program, just on the court, off the court, out in the community, get guys where they're supposed to be on the court. If you needed a bucket, he could go get it. If you needed a stop, he would guard your best player. And people just respected him every time he said something, because when he said it, he meant it. There's no guy that's been no one's been like that these last 2 years. There's been no guy that you could look at and go, yeah, that's our guy. You can maybe argue Malik Osborne last year, but once he went down, it fell off the trail. And people would have said that for Jalen Gainey this year. I've heard that, where he was that glue guy. He tears his ACL, 2 weeks before the season, and it's just not the same leadership wise. They've got to find that leader, especially as a point guard, a guy that knows where everybody's supposed to be. I think they have to change the scheme up a little bit. The switching 1 through 5 has been meticulously broken down and broken apart recently. Florida State actually defends almost longer than anybody else in the country, because teams are just constantly ball screening to get the matchup they want and then just scoring off of that. I think that's got to get fixed. The offense has to get fixed slightly. There's a lot of things that need to happen this year, and I think Hamilton and Alford are going to have a conversation about it. It's going to be an interesting offseason. That's for sure. We're, like I said, we're 2.5 weeks away, essentially, from the offseason starting. Once you lose in the conference tournaments, you can go right in the transfer portal and start doing what you need to do. So it's gonna get busy. And it's gonna get busy quick.
What if they win the conference tournament and make the NCAA tournament?
I knew Dustin was going to ask that. He's just trying.
Is it sad if I'd say I'd be disappointed? Like, obviously, I want this team to win. But it's like, man, this season's been such a mess.
Yeah. Time to move on.
It's crazy because, a month ago, we're like, are they maybe starting to turn the ship in conference play with wins at Pitt and at Notre Dame, 2 places that have historically been tough on Florida State? And then, they played Clemson really close at home, a game they really should have won.
Yeah.
And then in the last 2 weeks, you lose at Pitt at home, which, that's whatever. Pitt's a really good team, as I mentioned earlier. But the loss of Clemson by 40 points last week, it's one of the lowest points of the program for me. Even lower than the Stetson loss last year or earlier in the year and the Troy loss. Like, I remember when we beat Clemson by 50 at home in 2017. That was 6 years ago, and somehow we've won 90 points. I don't know what's happened between now and then, but obviously something needs to change.
Well, we might have to send you to the Diamond soon with this baseball. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Might have to make some adjustments here.
I will do football recruiting before I do baseball.
Oh, former co-host would love hearing that now. Love hearing that. Damn. Well, but yeah, okay. Well, we'll keep on alert for those basketball games. Like you said, I think it's already blown off my head. The basketball season's still going on. That's kind of how it goes for
just 4 more games.
Me at this moment, sadly.
We're so close.
Yep. But the previews are always great. They're the best on the beat. Nobody can say that. Nobody can say that they got the best coverage except for VZ here and what he does for us at NoelGandy.com. So I know there's still a lot of basketball fans. We still didn't lose any viewers while talking about that. So I think everybody kind of wanted to get your take on what's going on with Florida State basketball and ways to fix that. So we'll have more conversations after the season wraps up.
And definitely read the article that's coming out tomorrow.
Yeah.
I went to a lot more detail about statistics and why they're so bad. Speaking more about the attrition and the injuries and everything in between. So definitely give that a read whenever they decide to publish it.
Hopefully tomorrow. We'll see. We'll get around to it.
Yeah, when Dustin gets around to it, it'll be there eventually. As long as it gets out there for the noon piece, people definitely want to be eating their lunch and seeing how to fix this FSU basketball program. I think it could help. But yeah, I think that's going to wrap things up. Next week, we will be doing Florida State Spring Camp Defense Edition. So we'll be diving into there just like we did with the offense. We'll have Cam McDonald, former Florida State tight end. He's currently in training prep. That episode's actually going to be at 7 p.m. because I guess he has a tight sleeping schedule. So we'll have an earlier night on here. Won't have to be on here till 9:30.
Amazing.
So we get to jump on here a little bit earlier. And first question will be like, what time are you going to bed? Are you going to bed at 8 p.m.? Like, what kind of schedule is this? What are you doing? Are you meditating? I don't know. But we're going to have Cam McDonald on at 7 o'clock next week. And then I believe if I can pull up my calendar, we are going to have our next Calculated Chaos with Brian Stork on the first day. It's going to be actually the first day of spring practice, which is on March 6th. We're going to do that one at 7 p.m. And that will be our Clemson Rewind. And hopefully going to have a few guests for that played for Florida State in that game. So that one should be really fun. And we've kind of moved it to where that's probably going to be a 2-hour show because Brian said he's got a lot of film and a lot of different things that he needs to talk about. So we're going to do 2 hours on that minimum. So that should be a fun one. But nonetheless, we'll see you guys next week at 7 p.m. with former FSU tight end Cam McDonald. You can always listen to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, YouTube. Hit the like button. If you're on iTunes, hit the subscribe button too so you get notified every time we release a new episode. Appreciate everybody listening with us, watching with us. Got a lot of coverage coming for you guys the next couple of weeks with spring camp. So looking forward to giving you guys some goodies. Appreciate you. Have a great rest of y'all's week. And we'll talk to you guys next Wednesday at 7. Peace.